Hey, welcome along to Late to the Party Reviews. My name's Nick, and I'm going to be your host for today as we run through a review of The Last Jedi, finally. So I've been wanting to start a review show on my channel for quite a while now. The trouble is that I'm never the first in to do anything because I'm a father of three, so I didn't get to see The Last Jedi until just last week. I mean, I think I've been quite clear in the past with my last Nick's Notorious Story video, Trials and Tribulations, which you can watch, I'll link it at the end of this, that I love Star Wars very much. And so this review is going to be about The Last Jedi, which I'm very late to the party with. A lot of people have already given their opinions, but I want to give mine. And obviously, there's going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet, you are very late to the party, but click off this video and come back after you've done yourself a favour. I mean, watch the movie, not like have a wank or something. So I'm finally going to review it now. It wouldn't have been my first pick, I would have done something a bit more out there and a bit more zany, but I see a lot of comments online about it. I held off a long time before actually being able to see the movie, so I didn't read them for a long time as well. Going into the movie with the expectation that it might have sucked, and seeing all of these comments after the fact, I wanted to finally put my 2 cents into this. And I apologise if this is your first time seeing me. I'm not normally the slow down. I'm reupholstering my chair back there, so I'm on a rocker. So let's go into this now. So I'm going to be really upfront with you guys. My bias is probably going to come through in this review anyway, but hopefully I have some insights or some ideas that might change some of the preformed opinions that you have of the movie anyway. And I'm just going to say straight up there, I thought this was a great movie. I thought it was really awesome. The film itself was really well put together. The pacing was really awesome. We're going to talk about the pacing a lot throughout the whole review. But as a Star Wars movie, a standalone Star Wars movie, I just thought it was really in tune with the whole feel of how those films go. That's my interpretation of how I feel about it. You may not agree with that, but I'll tell you why I feel that way as we go through this, and we might be able to at least see eye to eye. So people made the comparison straight away after seeing Force Awakens that this would be a mimic or mirror of Empire Strikes Back, and that The Force Awakens had a lot of the same themes that A New Hope had. And it didn't really disappoint us at the beginning of this. It started off with rebels escaping the Galactic Empire, it said it in the opening crawl. However, the difference here is that with the pacing, they cut out that whole initial slow, Han and Luke getting lost in the snow. They didn't have the same thing there because our characters are already scattered, like at the end of the opening Hoth sequence. And that was good. That went really well for the pacing because you hit the ground running and you knew that this film was going to be fast-paced and action-packed, which it was. I really did also enjoy the interaction between Hux and Poe. You never really get that in the battles in the Star Wars movies in the past. It was good to see some back and forward, and I felt that the humour wasn't too misplaced. A lot of people are saying that they thought that was really dumb. Didn't really sit with the theme of a Star Wars movie, but I think it was well placed for the emotions that you get chucked at you during the duration of this film, and those other emotions being sadness and for some people pure hatred. It really delivers something for the film that is a bit lighthearted and will lighten the mood for the audience from the get-go. It also, introduces Dameron in a really good way. It shows that Hux has those insecurities, and it's humour without going full Jar Jar. Never go full Jar Jar. So this opening sequence, it sets the pacing beautifully. It shows us the plight of the rebellion. It shows that they are really still up against a behemoth of an enemy, but it also puts in a convenient scene between Hux and Snoke, which reestablishes the kind of dominance he has over Hux and how Hux tries to sort of redeem himself. When he mentioned that they had a tether or had the rebels on a string, and then we see that they're tracking them, it made me think that they might be tracking them through Finn. They never really talked about the mechanism that they had for tracking after that, which would have been interesting. If it was Finn, it would have led to him needing to potentially leave the rebels and sacrifice himself to save them. But instead, they talk about the means of how they track them, which is a random plot device, literally, and that is the reason that Finn needs to leave. So it's still the same end. So instead, that mechanism becomes the main focus of his arc, and everything else kind of falls to the wayside. And that leads to a rather, I'm going to be honest here, a rather weird subplot where Finn and Rose need to abscond to a casino, the planet Las Vegas. That whole part felt really zany and kind of out there. It felt like they had a quota of how many planets you need to visit in a Star Wars movie, and they were just hashing one in. That and the scene with Maz Kanata was a little bit weird, how she was having that weird union meeting. But I think if we step back from that and look at the events that happened in the last movie, there is no more Senate, there is no more governance of these people. So the fact that they're having a union dispute, even though it was meant to be maybe a bit of light-hearted comedy, it could speak a little bit about what's happening with the political turmoil in the rest of the universe or the galaxy, which also could be the reason why later on you don't see the support of the rebels when they really needed it. So yeah, Maz Kanata and the casino planet were a little bit out of place for me. Those are probably the only two things. And that one scene.
That's not how the Force works.
Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about Luke and Kylo and Rey. Now here's where I've seen the most tenacious criticism online. Luke's appearance, first of all. We've had about 30 years between Luke's last appearance in Return of the Jedi and then his kind of teaser cameo appearance in The Force Awakens to kind of think about what his character would be and become. And we've had expanded universe novels and all sorts of other stuff to kind of help build that perception of what we think he should be. And then we've had a further 2 years after Force Awakens where he says no lines to kind of figure out what he's going to be like. You've got this really intense emotional look on his face, all the stuff that must be going through his mind. You've got to wonder what he's going to do. And the first thing he does is he just tosses all of those thoughts literally out the window, and the lightsaber as well. Which I think, I didn't mind that. I thought that was quite clever. It was a way of challenging the perceptions that an audience would have, which is what a film is meant to do. A film is meant to surprise you, and this is one of those. I mean, they actually put this in the trailer.
This is not going to go the way you think.
It's kind of like a teaser setup for how the movie's going to pan out. For me, this erratic and unconventional portrayal of Luke Skywalker actually kind of fits in with how I saw the character growing up. I saw Luke as a bit of a whiner.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Wait a minute, where'd she go? Bring her back. Play back the entire message.
Why didn't you outrun him? I thought you said this thing was fast.
You forget it! I already tried it! It's magnetically sealed!
3PO!
A bit headstrong.
You must complete the training.
I can't keep the vision out of my head. They're my friends. I gotta help them.
And reluctant to kind of listen to rules. This is the character that Luke was. You see him grow into the somber and resolute character towards the end of the trilogy, only after he's faced with seeing the death of, Obi-Wan Kenobi, his friend Wedge, and when he finally has to come to the realization that Vader is his father and he has to confront him and potentially kill him. That's where you see him transform into this really stoic, Jedi-esque character, and that's where we see him last. And a lot of people think that he will maintain that characteristic throughout, and that's sort of reinforced by his appearance in Awakens. That's really the last impression that we had of Luke, but who's to say that his demeanour didn't change back to a little bit more of who he was once he's caught up in the euphoria of them winning the rebellion. And that could also possibly be part of what led to the First Order being able to rise to power. The other half of the criticism with these whole training scenes is that Luke and Rey don't really do any real training. You do see her in the trailer spinning a lightsaber around, and the expectation is that Luke is training her in some sort of lightsaber form, which would have been really nice. But getting back to the pacing of the film, you can't really have a character learning a full form of lightsaber combat while her friends have 16 hours left of fuel. It just wouldn't make sense. So it's really important that this didn't really happen. There is a really important scene that they have put in there where Rey picks up her quarterstaff and starts training with it. Now the way that we perceive this is potentially this is her morning routine. This could be something that she's done every day of her life since she was 10. And this would also be a callback to The Force Awakens, where you see her use her quarterstaff to great effect when she's still on Jakku. So we have to assume that she potentially does this every day and that she is quite a skilled warrior. So is it really that much of a reach to say, why can't you just pick up a lightsaber and start using it instinctively? If we're going to call right back to The Phantom Menace, I know a lot of you don't want to, we also see Anakin Skywalker basically self-train himself in becoming a pilot for a pod racer.
Has anybody ever seen a pod race?
They're pod racing on Malastare. Very fast, very dangerous.
I'm the only human who can do it.
You must have Jedi reflexes if you race pods.
Now he only was able to do that because of his affinity with the Force as well. So was it really so much of a reach to say that Rey couldn't just pick up a lightsaber and instinctively know how to use it? That, coupled with all of her quarterstaff training, it kind of makes sense that she would be able to do that stuff. Now, I mentioned earlier that people had the perception that this film would mimic Empire, and so far it does. We've got the escape from the Rebel base while being pursued by the Empire. We've got Rey absconding from the main arc of the story to go on her own training mission with a mystic Jedi Master. The other similarities are shown in the appearance of a character named DJ who shows up in Rose and Finn's arc of the story. Now, he has a striking similarity to Lando Calrissian. When we first meet him, he was in a prison cell, so straight away you can tell he has a similar background to what Lando had, except that he hasn't yet reformed his ways and capitalized on it like Lando did in Empire Strikes Back. Where the other similarities are is that he also betrays Rose and Finn and strikes a deal with the Empire. The difference between the characters is that Lando still has a bit of heart and soul in him. You know, you can tell he feels bad, and he actually redeems himself in the movie. We don't see DJ do that. And I don't think we will see DJ do that. He did surprise me though, twice. The first time was when he made the deal with Rose to take her necklace because it was a perfect conductor for the circuit that he knew he would have to work on eventually. You could look at that as being a bit cheeky, maybe a bit convenient, and he felt bad, or maybe he'd grown a bond and wanted to give it back to her. I personally see it as he knew what he'd have to do, and he asked for that necklace so he could do that. So that was quite cool. The second time that he surprised me is when the AT-AT fired its cannon. I thought for sure he was going to be in that. When the top got ripped off and it got revealed to be BB-8, I probably had the same look on my face as Rose and Finn did. I was like, how? He doesn't have arms. But anyway, instead DJ's character kind of leaves the audience with a really important lesson, that there is no good and evil, as they're portrayed in the romanticized ways of all the Star Wars films up to date. That instead there's just good intentions and bad intentions, and then the perception that people have of those intentions.
They blow you up today, you blow them up tomorrow. It's just business.
It's an idea that's kind of mirrored with the interaction between Kylo and Rey after the end of, that scene, where she has the choice to join him and decides not to. If they could just put aside their differences in that one scene, all of the suffering, all of the chaos, the war itself could potentially end. And that's the tragedy, that's the really gripping part of the film that the audience should be paying attention to, but we can't look past all of the mistakes that you perceive in it. But that one scene there is the whole setup for the next episode, which is the conclusion of the trilogy, so that's really exciting in itself. I also really like how DJ left these ideas kind of implanted in Finn's mind, how he saw who the weapon developers were designing the weapons for, and how really both sides are being hustled by a greater evil. If you have that evil to look out for, you could potentially set aside your own differences between the First Order and the Resistance and come to common grounds. I know I'm skipping all around the place. I was talking about similarities, and this is kind of where those similarities end for me, by the one viewing that I've done of the movie. For Rey's story arc, it's kind of like she's skipping ahead an episode so that they can get past all of these similarities and get to new ground, which is what we as an audience really desperately need. So when she leaves the Jedi Temple, it's kind of like she's leaving Dagobah and then arriving on Endor. I really like the fact that the Millennium Falcon's escape pods are kind of like coffins, so when she hops in, you kind of get this foreshadowing that she could be in for something really bad, and she kind of arrives at this the funeral attended by an assembly of stormtroopers to find Kylo there waiting for her, and she's in her open casket. That was really well done, because it had a sense of foreboding that something really bad was going to happen to her. So these are the similarities we get again, but this time it's with the Return of the Jedi, where Rey and Kylo are having this sort of internal conflict between themselves. They want to be able to see eye to eye, but there's a greater power that they're sort of having to bow to. In this case, it's Snoke rather than the Emperor. You also get another similarity in that Snoke shows Rey the peril that the fleet is in. You get all these callbacks to the Return of the Jedi. And here we touch on another controversy. Snoke is killed by Kylo, with very little more of his character given to the audience. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. And I think that for Kylo, this is a really important part of his character development. You can kind of tell, or at that point it becomes obvious, that he has potentially been waiting for a moment like this for all of his life. Did I just quote Phil Collins? Being serious, Kylo is following the path of his grandfather. He knows his grandfather was downtrodden by the Emperor and had been taking every opportunity he could to be able to get rid of the Emperor and take power for himself. If Kylo was true to his past, he would be doing the same thing, and this is the first time that opportunity presented itself to him. I think the resolve came from when he found out that the visions that Snoke put in his head were false. But anyway, that's a little bit more into the character than I want to get. So back to the film. The resulting battle after Snoke's death is simply breathtaking. I was on the edge of my seat, and it had nothing to do with the probably liter and a half of Fanta that I'd finished before Finn even touched down on the casino planet. I simply enjoyed seeing these two fight side by side, seeing the potential of what they could be like as a team together. And at this stage, we didn't know who Rey's parents were. Nothing was spoken about them, so you kind of began to see the similarities between the two. You know that from the expanded universe, Leia and Han had twin children, and maybe somehow they're going to hash into the plot that Rey and Kylo are twins. The next scene, Kylo basically dismisses that straight away. I'm not going to talk about that too much, except to say that's what Kylo said. He's trying to get her to do something he wanted her to do. Potentially that was him manipulating her. We're not going to know until we see a proper flashback as to what her true parentage is, so that's probably waiting for the next episode. So we'll skip past that and we'll jump back to the fleet. So the trouble we get to see with the fleet is that they begin to attack the current social problem that the world faces in real life, as most Star Wars films do. Force Awakens and Rogue One have done a kind of okay job showing that females can be really good leads for a film and don't need no man.
What are you doing? Come on! Let go of me! Come on, we gotta move! I know how to run without you holding my hand! It's just... No. The one I'm pointing to. No.
Except that we need positive female role models in our life. I just think that Disney and Star Wars are probably just trying a little bit too hard with the way that they portray them, kind of rubbing our face in it with a few things. That's all I take issue with. Anyway, I'm kind of missing the point here, and I'm getting into the down thumb territory with that comment, so I'm going to move on. What we get in this episode is a likable middle-class man who kind of gets knocked down a peg or two by his female superiors, which is fine in itself. It kind of gives the audience, you see why he does it. He accepts it and moves on. He accepts their authority, which is good. He was meant to do that. He made a bad judgment call, paid off, audience loves him. He gets demoted from commander to whatever it was. I can't remember what the rankings were. And then when you see Leia taken out of commission, the shift of the command, as the audience feels, should go to him. However, it goes to a new character who we all know needs to be respected and listened to.
With our current fuel consumption, there's a very limited amount of time that we can stay out of range of those Star Destroyers.
Very kind of you to make me aware.
Mansplaining is specifically when a guy tells a woman something that she already knows.
And we side with Poe on the conflict that she needs to be transparent with what the plan is and what they're going to do. So by the time we get to the point that he's assaulting her and staging a mutiny, we're, as an audience, we're going, good job. Yeah, well done, yeah, good job. But if she had only broken the silence and told him what the plan was from the get-go, there would be much less suffering, there would be much less heartache, more people would have... you can see what I did there, you can see what it looked like they did there. But I think in the part of the makers of this movie, they've kind of struck out with the Me Too movement, mimicking the story that they already had in place. Either that, or they went back and did some really clever, quick retakes and edited what they already had to make it fit the narrative of what the current political structure is in Hollywood. So hats off to them. That was kind of well done. It was a kind of good observation, which fits into how we as a society is interacting with each other and observing things and changing our viewpoints on things. And I myself, I quite like that narrative. My perception was going to be that she was a spy or that she was not who she was claiming to be, so I was pleasantly surprised when it turned out she was the hero of the story and Poe was a bit of a dick. His character development in this film has been awesome as well. It's been good to see him go from being headstrong to being super headstrong to being knocked down of an actual peg, and now going forward he's probably going to be the rebellion leader, and he's had that in his past to carry him forward.
We have a spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
So I'm excited to see where his character goes. Okay, now we get to the final standoff, the thing everybody hated in this movie as far as I can tell. Luke getting killed by Kylo. If I didn't mention it before, there's spoilers in this video. Spoilers. And yes, I do say Luke getting killed by Kylo. I'll touch on that in a moment. There are several reasons why people feel cheated by this, from what I can see anyway. I think the perception is that Luke was meant to stay on. He's the flagship character who's meant to stay on and train Rey in the way of the Force. I mean, by all means, Leia should have been the one that dies, right? But she somehow inexplicably survives. And that's going to be really interesting. Are they going to like Tarkin her now? How are they gonna have her die in the next one? They're just gonna write her out in the opening crawl? I guess that remains to be seen. So this is where the film steps out from that formula of mimicking things that have happened in the past, and it really stands on its own. It just had to kill Luke Skywalker to do that. Basically, nothing in this ending pans out the way people were expecting. But why is that a bad thing? Why should you go to the movie and get what you were expecting? Because you can't, you won't be surprised that way. It's not a vending machine. You don't go to a movie and push Coke and get a Coke. You go to the movie like a slot machine and you pull a lever, and sometimes you don't win and sometimes you get a jackpot. And for me, this scene was a jackpot. I mentioned before I was busting to go to the toilet. I think I almost popped a kidney in there, but there was no way I was getting out of my seat for this showdown. This was, by all means, the best scene in the movie. My opinion, you can't take that away from me, but followed closely by the hyperspace jump scene during that battle. You know the one. The other reason people are pissed off is that Luke wasn't even present for the fight, which people feel ripped off about. But for me, that's not a big issue. That was the real surprise. The impression I got from the end of that whole fight was I just felt sad. You know, my childhood hero was dead. It's really interesting to see the real harsh criticism about this whole scene, and the same thing happened with The Force Awakens, with criticism about the final duel, where people kind of missed the point. Let's just go back 2 years to The Force Awakens. Everybody was seething that Kylo Ren, you know, this master Sith warrior, whatever you want to call him, was bested by this puny girl who'd never held a lightsaber before. Everyone forgets that Kylo Ren got shot by Chewbacca moments before that. The whole film builds up the point that Chewbacca's boltcaster is this powerful weapon.
Wow.
Hey, can I try that?
So he's using all of his power to sort of stop his guts from spilling out while he's fighting Rey. Obviously he's distracted. It's a no-brainer that he was going to lose that battle. Cast your mind forward to The Last Jedi. What do we see in this film that's a repetition? We see Kylo and Rey having these conversations with each other through the Force. In the first one, Rey picks up her pistol and tries to shoot him, and you can kind of see that he felt that. You know, he recoils and the communication ends. One of the other times that they're talking is in the rain, and Kylo actually has water on his head from that communication. So when Luke and Kylo are having their communication, what happens to Luke? He gets a barrage of AT-AT fire, and he has Kylo slice him through the body with his lightsaber, as well as put it into Luke's chest. And that's a really important key scene, because when he puts the lightsaber into Luke's chest, we see Luke for the first time back at the Jedi Temple, and he looks to be in pain. And you perceive that as being the connection through the Force that he's holding. But thinking back, what I believe now is happening is that he's actually being injured, and it's wearing him down. Yes, in the end, he becomes one with the Force, but I think prior to doing that, he had to already have been worn down to the point that he could let go of his mortal coil and kind of disappear. That's just my takeaway from it. You know, it's clear that Luke has accepted that he needs to move on and leave this, whatever this is, to Kylo and to Rey. He's imparted all he can to Rey, and he needs to leave her to pick this up and go with it. And it's a really interesting side note. It looks like Rey has either stolen the books from the Jedi Deku tree in that last scene where Finn and Rose are sitting together, or somehow Yoda got them in there. But she's holding the Jedi knowledge, you know, the sort of original text, unimpeded with what somebody's perception of the Force should be, like how Luke was presenting it. So there could be something that happens with that. Anyway, I think I've made my end point quite clear throughout this entire review. I really enjoyed The Last Jedi. I think that it set up the next episode to take a really interesting turn. We don't know what's going to happen. It's very unclear what the future is going to be of this trilogy, and that's how it should be. Anyway, I'm sure I don't have to tell you to leave a comment down below. Some of you probably already have some pretty cool things to say to me about what my opinions are, so I welcome that. I welcome any feedback you have. Feel free to leave it down below, and I'll try and answer that if I can. This is the first review I've ever done of anything aside from opening things in boxes, so sorry if I missed the point or if I rambled a little bit. This is new, but I will try to do late to the party reviews on some other things that I have my sights on. So thank you for coming along. I've been Nick, you've been you, and I might see you in the future.